Welcome everyone. I am really glad to see you're all excited about international trade. So this morning I'm going to provide a talk that's a little bit different from the norm. I'm not a production person, but rather I'm an ag economist, and I focus really heavily on international trade of organic products. I will, though, in keeping with the theme of our talk today, tie in towards the end of this some of the consumer demand type issues that I think will be touched upon by the other speakers. So today I'll be presenting a paper that is sort of a new and evolving piece between myself and Dr. Neil Hooker at Ohio State as a collaborator on this. Okay, so in terms of our markets, when we're looking at international organic, so not just in the US, not any specific country, but globally, where it's estimated as of 2012, our market is about close to $65 billion already. A lot of dollars at stake here. With that, a majority of the revenues are gained through customer countries in the northern hemisphere. So recent estimates suggest that about 90% of those 65 billion in sales are coming from the north. Okay, of that, currently we have 88 countries that have some form of an organic regulation, some form of standard on the books. There's another 12 countries that are in the process currently of developing additional ones. Okay, again, those standards, though, are not wholly consistent with one another. There's a lot of variety in them. There's a lot of variety in product coverage, as well as the specific requirements of standards for given products. Okay, and of this, and there's a lot of folks in the room that will know a lot better about the actual land dedicated to it, but globally it's estimated about 37.5 million hectares of land under organic production, which sounds like a lot, but really only amounts to about just less than 1% of our total organic or total agricultural land in production. So we have a lot of room to grow here in terms of space. Okay, so my goal today is to introduce the international organic markets, share a little bit about their importance, a little bit of what we know, and frankly it's not a long story for that piece. I will, though, provide some information about the U.S. take on this. So looking at our trade policies, what the U.S. is doing to try to facilitate trade, both on imports and exports. Look at the actual data, which, again, to the limited extent that we have some, and then touch upon a few thorny issues related to this. Okay, so why do we care about our international markets? Clearly, this is a market opportunity for U.S. domestic producers. We are, though, at the moment facing changing market conditions. So as I'll share in a few moments, we're entering into some equivalency agreements and other trade policies that are allowing our markets to be open to new imports from new countries, but also to a wider variety of products. So we've got that increasing. This obviously has important consequences for our domestic producers in terms of the prices that they will be able to charge, the quality, or rather quantity of production available on the domestic market, and some other policy impacts we can look at later as well. At the same time that this is being done in an environment where we're having increased demand for our organic products. So over the last 10 years, and certainly even as of 2012, I believe, there was, again, reaffirmed evidence that we were having about a 10% annual increase in the U.S. in demand for organic products. Strong growing market. We do, though, have some constraints in this market. So currently, the Organic Trade Association, they do annual surveys of the folks in the production and manufacturing end of the market. 58% of organic food manufacturers are expected to increase their use of organic content, organic ingredients, over the next 3 years. So again, increasing demand not just for our raw farm products, but also for ingredients. But they're also facing supply constraints. This has not a new issue, certainly, but due both to supply challenges as well as some barriers due to pricing of some of those organic ingredients. Our organic processed food market isn't growing to, again, fulfill the potential consumer demand. All right, so looking at the size of these markets, just a few more details. So U.S. Market as of 2013 was estimated to be about 35 billion. As was pointed out in one of our talks yesterday, that accounts for about 44% of the global demand for organic products. Germany, France, Canada sequentially are the second through fourth largest markets. Okay, per capita consumption, surprisingly high. Again, global per capita consumption, taking the whole dollar value of this market divided by global population, we get an estimate of over $9 per head per person of organic consumption. Of that, we have really strong demand in a few countries, particularly in Scandinavia, Scandinavia, but also Switzerland, Denmark, and Luxembourg are very, very large per capita consumers. So again, they're not coming out in terms of our total market demand just due to their population size. Okay. There is, though, some evidence that the demand for organic products has been limited and changed in a way due to the recent economic pressures. So we've got some countries that were on really strong organic product growth trajectories, and that has been somewhat limited due to the economic crisis and hasn't recovered even with the economies recovering fully in some areas. Okay, so let's focus on the US for a moment. What do we know here? Well, we have some information. I'll say not too much, though, admittedly, at this point. There was a study by Laura in 2000, and she did an assessment of characteristics of demand for by consumers in major markets, European Union, Japan, and North America. And in that study, she was looking at characteristics of organic consumers in those markets and looked at or anticipated some market opportunities and growth, again, from the perspective of the US. Again, that's a little bit dated at this point. We do, though, more recently have some information from Baldwin using US ITC. ITC is the US International Trade Commission. So they just started, and I'll share this with you, or details of this with you in a moment, but they just recently started collecting data on imports and exports of organic products as separate from conventional products. So we're now starting to get a little time series information on this. Baldwin took a snapshot of what this looked like 18 months into this process and provided some nice summary, descriptive information in that piece. There was a study, and I know someone here was based on the initial data collection this was based, or that this study used, looking at the organic market from the handler perspective. So in this sort of report, citing a lot of the information from this large survey, they looked at the actual products that were being demanded, the locations of demand. They found in this work that the handler size, so the size of the organization, was found to be really important in the decision to import products from abroad. So large companies were found to import more readily than smaller ones. At the same time, though, the size, if you were a small firm and you made the commitment to import, these authors found that you actually would import proportionally more of your ingredients and what have you than, you would actually commit, once you were committed to the organic market, if you're small, that you're actually investing a lot in importing those products. If not from a sort of traditional academic research side, but we do have some important industry publications. I know you're quite familiar with some of them. We've got the large reports that are coming out doing estimates annually, sort of collecting information from not all, but many organic producing countries trying to get these size estimates we saw a few moments ago. And then on the US side, we've got the Organic Trade Association, and again, they're looking a little more downstream at the processed goods demand and ingredient categories of things. So some great resources there. Okay, so what are we looking at here today, our contributions? Okay, first, a quick overview of US organic trade policies. So we've got three types of tools that we make use of in the US, to facilitate both imports and exports of organic products. The first is known as a recognition agreement. And this is an agreement where we enter with a foreign country to say, you know what, we're going to let you certify agents in your country to certify organic products under USDA label. Okay, so we don't use this, we don't have a lot of cases of this, but there are three countries, again, in which auditors in New Zealand, India, and Israel can go in and verify that something is USDA organically produced. Okay, again, these are a little dated. We haven't entered into any new ones of these lately. Another opportunity we make use of is export arrangements. Okay, this is a case where we've come into agreement with this one country in this instance, and they fully accept our products. So if we have produced organic or under USDA certification here, it's going to be accepted as organic in Taiwan in this example. Only one example of these. The ones you hear about quite a bit more, I'm sure, are our equivalency agreements. Okay, these are cases where we've got sort of a bilateral agreement in which we produce products, they're accepted as organic in the other market, and similarly, though, we accept their products as organic in our market.
Is there any significance of the height of the different?
There isn't. There was just for visual display so they weren't overlapping each other too much. Okay, so more importantly is just the timing of these arrangements. So we, again, very quickly after we entered into our Taiwanese agreement, we had our first equivalency arrangement with Canada. Perhaps not too surprisingly, a lot of similarities and connections already in our food systems and policies. We entered into midway through 2012 into our EU agreement. Okay, a very, very large, obviously an important market. And very recently, January of 2014 and then July 1st of 2014, we entered into agreements with Japan and Korea respectively. Now these agreements, as much as it sounds, we've got them all under one category, they are not themselves perfectly equivalent one to the other. Okay, each agreement is separately negotiated. Different items are on the table and discussed in each of these cases. The actual coverage of these agreements vary by product. Okay, so some may exclude live animals, live plants. Some may exclude animal products. So it really just depends on the agreement that we're negotiating.
So how will the Trans-Pacific affect this?
So that will, the other agreements, sort of the WTO and other bilateral trade agreements, or regional trade agreements in that case, they, as far as, well, I don't know for the TPP, but for other ones, they allow for the trade, but they don't say anything about the labeling, which is what this agreement's getting into. So allowing things to be certified as organic. The other ones are just saying we'll allow a product to be. Absolutely. Okay, so just really quickly, again, they vary by the actual products that are covered with them. They vary by rules of what's allowed or prohibited in cases in terms of specific compounds. So many of these agreements don't allow a variety of antibiotics. The Canadian agreement does not allow products that have made use of sodium nitrate, for example. They vary as well in terms of their administrative requirements. So the actual labeling, what the label looks like, which labels can be co-used on what type of products, shipping documentation, things like that also vary by agreement. Okay, so in terms of the US, given all this work we've done to try to facilitate trade, let's see how we've done. Okay, I'll just quickly go ahead here. So here is US exports. Looks good so far. We have a general trend increasing in exports. So I should go back. I mentioned before that we've just started collecting this data as of 2011. Okay. Prior to that, we did not have any way at the border to be able to make a distinction between our conventional and organic imports or exports. Okay, so of those that we're currently tracking, we have, at least for our exports, looks not bad. Any guesses on what our imports look like?
We like.
Okay, we've got suggestions of increasing, and there we go. Okay, here is overall our import volumes as well. So we've got some cases where it doesn't look too bad. We've got our exports exceeding our imports in a few little time periods. We have some very large jumps. I will discuss those in a quick moment. But yes, if we were to take a time trend through this, it would look like that we have a higher rate of increase of our import of organic products than we do of our exports. If we look at our net exports, so our exports less our imports, how are we doing in aggregate? That's reflected in our red line. So here's our 0. So again, all but a very few moments, we actually have been importing quite a bit more than we've been exporting. Okay.
This is, monthly, weekly data?
This is monthly data. Yeah.
So are we a net importer anyway of agricultural products into the U.S. and they're shipped around 2012? So I guess I don't find that so surprising. Not that you asked.
No, please. Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what time period snapshot. We tend to love variety here, so we import a lot of things we don't produce domestically, even though we could have capacity to satisfy most of our food demand. But okay, now the reason I want to take a quick pause, I mentioned these jumps, which look really strange when we look at trade data. That's not what you would normally expect to see. The reason for this, though, is we have an increasing list of products that we're actually tracking. Okay, so just to back up, in 2014, we were importing from 85 countries, exporting to 90. When we started keeping track of organic versus conventional products in 2011, we had 20 product lines that we are tracking for imports, 23 for exports. Now this is, for anyone familiar with this data, this is at the HS10 level. This is fairly refined, well, very refined, and as refined as we get in terms of product categories. Okay, so this would be, and I'll show you an example in a moment, this would be like Roma tomatoes fresh and chilled. Okay, soybeans not for seed, maybe broken kernel. Like, you know, it's as precise as we get in these things. Okay, now what's happened though is every 2 years they've gone back to this list and expanded the number of products that they're actually keeping track of this information for. So when we see this increase, as of January in these years, we're getting all of a sudden this new range of products being added to the list. So this may not be, this isn't saying that of our existing products we're importing that much more, but rather part of this is due to we're just adding more products to the list and keeping track of. Okay. All right. So with that being said, this graph shows with our original list only, if we were to just track those initial 20 and 23 products, what's happening in our trends? Well, of our exports, we still see a general trend of increase. Imports, a lot of that increase we were seeing was really because we're adding a lot more product, not a lot, but some really important ones. Durum wheat, flaxseed, olive oil, wines, for example, have been added recently. So that made those trade volumes look quite high. And again, in this case, if we again just keep with our initial product coverage, we actually look like we're not perfectly so, but more on parity with in terms of our imports and our exports. All right, let's do a quick, given I'm already using my time up here, a quick overview of actually who the partners are, who our products, what products we're trading. So as mentioned yesterday, our largest country who we're importing from is Mexico. Peru, India, Brazil are some other big players. For anybody engaged with Canadian market, you might be surprised that we are actually tied with a number of smaller country partners here in terms of what we're importing. The products themselves, by far, coffee is the winner. Perhaps not surprising for anyone with a cup in hand at the moment. Soybeans, though, another very important import. Bananas, red wine, honey, and the like. This data and the previous slide, this is 2014 only information that I'm sharing here, just as of the end of the calendar year for last year. So it's as current as we can possibly get on this. Okay, I was just going to show a quick case study there, but I'll quickly move ahead to our export story. So a majority of our exports, again, far and away, is going to Canada. We're actually exporting more than 5.5 times the amount to Canada than we're importing from them. Okay, Mexico here, also a big player, although they looked huge a moment ago. We are actually, if we look at the numbers, we're actually exporting more to them than we're importing from them as well. Okay, and then we have our more distant markets, much smaller share of our exports are destined for those areas. In terms of our products, we have apples as our largest export, some of our leafy greens, grapes, spinach, strawberries, and the like. Okay. And again, these lists are all constrained with those product categories we're actually tracking. Okay, so there could be other products we're actually trading a lot more of, but we just don't have information to reflect that at the moment. Okay, so some of our opportunities. So if you're a U.S. organic producer, what can you do with this information? Well, one, we can look for areas for potential import substitution. If we're importing something from abroad that's organic, maybe we can look to this list to see, well, perhaps there is an opportunity here for me, for example, our teas. This should see green and black. We're importing a lot of this at the moment. We're not producing very much organic tea domestically. There could be a market opportunity for us there, for example. So that's an idea of import substitution. We can make use of marketing windows. So this is a case where, well, a product may be available abroad. So overall, if we look at net aggregate annual data, but perhaps if we disaggregate that, look over months, we might see little windows of time where we've got market opportunities abroad. So we know already that our tomato markets domestically, we import part of the year from Canada, we import part of the year from Mexico, we supply our domestic demand other parts of the year with domestic production. Okay, so making use of those. We can also, perhaps some of our greenhouse production can be dedicated to taking advantage of that. We have lots of ingredient shortages we could also try addressing. And I'll just skip ahead here very quickly. From the consumer perspective then, overall, we really, some of the literature isn't yet looking at this, but it may be worth starting to consider. Is there different preferences for domestic versus foreign sourced organic products? Do we care, even if it's entering the U.S. under an equivalency agreement, where it's actually coming from? Do those differences vary by product too? So we might care for produce, but perhaps not for some of our grades, for example. Is there willingness to pay differences for organic products? And I should say OP here has been organic products, not open pollination, as we saw yesterday frequently? Okay, do we care or willing to pay differently for organic products certified under different schemes? So for the Japanese versus the EU certification. Oh, there we go, thank you. So with this, actually just as of 2014, there was one study in Europe looking at some of the within Europe certification. So the products that originated from Germany versus the UK and other countries, and they did find that there was a different willingness to pay and frankly trust in the certification from different regions, even within the European market. Okay, and just given the time, I'll quickly move ahead here. Just announced yesterday, some breaking news. There we have a new NEFA project actually looking at and we'll be expanding on these items. And again, this is in collaboration with Dr. Hooker, the title, Contemporary Organic Policy, Implications for Food and Ingredient Markets and Trade. So part of it will be focused on trade. What you've seen today is just a baby snapshot pre-study. Within this, we'll be looking at a number of additional items. On top of mind. One of which, so if we were to, for example, be able to harmonize our international organic standards, to what extent would that facilitate trade? With our equivalency agreements we're entering into, to what extent does that impact on trade diversion? So making trade products that we're already perhaps exporting, but how much does that change where we're actually sending them versus trade trade diversion and other trade changes. We'll just leave it at that. The study will also be more broad, however, and look at issues of the certification process, ingredient process, as well as a lot of consumer work, looking at how consumers evaluate labels of organic versus some of the other substitutable and complementary claims. And with that, I will end. Thank you.
All right, thank you.